Hi, thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to be talking about aero bike fits. Aero plus comfort equals speed. To tell you a little bit about myself, I'm Cynthia Stewart. I manage our Bike Barn Custom Fit Studio. I have been with Bike Barn for for 14 years, since 2006. I've been a cyclist for 20 plus years. I'm not a triathlete. I have done a triathlon just so I could relate to my tri-aero customers. And I need to do another one to redeem myself because the swim almost drowned me, but I was fast on the bike. I used to race mountain bikes, and now I'm more of a recreational rider. The studio's been here since 2008. We perform about 500 fits a year, and it really is my passion, doing bicycle fits. I get to work one-on-one with you. I get to solve problems. It's like a puzzle, but making sure that people enjoy their bike. I know as triathletes, a lot of time the bike portion is your least favorite segment of the triathlon, and I like to make it to where you enjoy your bike. I don't want you to dread going out and riding. So tonight we're going to talk about aero positions, and one of the things to consider, or some of the most important things to consider, is the appropriate aero position. And what's appropriate for one person is not necessarily the same thing that's appropriate for you. So the things that we need to look at, consider is, what is your event? Are you doing a sprint or an Olympic, which that's a short event? Sprint, you're on the bike for maybe 12 to 15 miles. Olympic, maybe up to 25 miles. But if you're doing a long course, like an Ironman or a half Ironman, you could be on a bike for 56 or 112 miles. And that's a long time in the saddle. I don't care how much time you spend training, that's a long time on the bike. And then if you're doing a time trial, that's a completely different event. Still an aero position, but the only thing you have to worry about is getting to that finish line and keeling over. You don't have to worry about running after your event. So when you're doing a triathlon, we always have to consider the length of your event and then what you're doing afterwards, running. So a 3-mile run or a full marathon, making sure we have you in the most appropriate position for you is what we're looking for. Things that we consider when we're doing an aero bike fit is what affects your power. Everyone wants to get out there and ride as fast as they can, generate as much power as they can. And your bike position greatly affects your ability to generate power. And it's not the only thing that affects your ability to generate power, because fatigue, or if you're getting sick or overtrained, that can affect your power also. Nutrition and hydration affect your ability to generate power, and then technique. But the things that I'm concerned about as a bike fitter is your position on the bike. And then what we focus on as we're going through a bike fit and looking at your position on the bike is your physical ability. Are you a brand new cyclist that has maybe been riding for 6 months, or are you an elite athlete that's been riding for several years and has a great base and muscle memory built up? The other very important thing that affects triathletes and all bike fits, it comes into play, but your flexibility. And I hear it all the time, I'm not very flexible, I'm not very flexible. Well, I'm not here to judge you, but I am here to make sure I check your flexibility so that when we are positioning you on the bike, we're not going beyond your ability or your limitation, your body's limitations. Hamstring flexibility, hip flexibility, all come into play with how we set you up on the bike. And then, like I said in the previous, with the previous slide, the length of your event is a big factor. So the thing that we want to avoid and I see it all the time with triathletes, you try to make your bike look like your favorite pro. And sure, the pros have got the latest and greatest and best equipment, and it's set up in the most aerodynamic position that the bike can be set up in. But you know what? How many of you out there are pros? Maybe a few, and I've fit a few pros, but the majority of my clients and athletes that come through here are recreational cyclists. We're doing it for fun. More than weekend warriors, but we're not getting paid to ride our bikes. So making sure that you're in a position that is appropriate for you. We can get your bike to look great. We can make it look just like the pros. We can slam that stem, put it as aero as it will go. But 9 times out of 10, your body can't handle that position. And what happens if you're not able to hold that tri position or that too aggressive aero position? You end up coming up on the base bars as opposed to staying in the aero position. And what happens when you come up on the base bars? You go from being extremely aero and tucked in and reducing your frontal surface area to coming up on the base bars. And you see, when I got taller, that's more frontal surface area. And that equates to drag. And drag equates to having to work harder to overcome that drag. So keeping in mind that we're not a pro, that we want to make the bike look like you, fit you. And then equipment that doesn't fit your needs. I know that when I was doing a little sprint triathlon, I didn't even put aero bars on my bike. I used my road bike because I hadn't trained. It was kind of a spur of the moment thing. I hadn't trained in aero. And it was kind of satisfying when I was passing people on their $10,000 aero bikes. But I would have been probably a little bit more aero if I had aero bars on. But the equipment that suits your needs. I have clients that come in and they want to get their first tri bike, or they're going to do their first triathlon and they need a bike. They ask me, do I need a tri bike or can I get a road bike? What should I do? And it's kind of a case-by-case basis. If you are out there enjoying that ride with your friends on the weekend or doing a group ride, which I know some group rides have started back up and in a safe manner, you might want a road bike, and you can always add on clip-on aero bars onto your road bike and make it be a little bit more of an aero position. Now, you want to adjust these and make them fit you, but making sure you have equipment that suits your needs. Most group rides don't really appreciate tri bikes or aero bikes in the peloton because they're designed to go fast. They're designed to be aerodynamic, but they go fast in a straight line. They don't handle quite the same as a road bike. So a tri bike is going to be a little twitchier. It doesn't corner as well. And the other thing, if you're in the market for a new bike, that when you're on your aero bars, if you're on a tri bike, you may have shifters here, but you don't have brakes there. And so when you're riding with a group and not able to get to your brakes can be of concern to the people you're riding with. So the reason that you came tonight is most likely because you're having some issues with your bike. So I'd like to touch on some Aero Fit issues that I hear people complain about. One of the biggest things that my triathletes talk about is saddle pain. When we put you into an aero position, or when you go to that aero bars, our bodies roll forward. And when we put you in aero, we're rotating you around the bottom bracket. We still want to preserve the same leg, knee angle, still want to preserve the hip angle, but we're rotating you forward and down so you can get a little bit more aero. And when your pelvis rolls forward, you end up putting a lot more pressure on the soft tissue if you're not in the right saddle. So we want to make sure that we avoid soft tissue. We're compressing arteries and nerves that run through that area. Sit bone pain. A lot of triathletes I see slide, or time trials will slide forward on the saddle. And when you slide forward, you're not sitting on the widest part of the seat. And now your sit bones are not being supported. Your pelvis is not supported. So if your sit bones are sitting just outside of the comfortable part of the saddle, it can almost feel like it's pushing you apart or pinching your sit bones. So anytime there's an extreme sit bone pain, that's to me a clue that you're not on the right seat, or you're not in the right position. The seat's not in the right position. Pelvis not being supported. If your pelvis is not supported properly, you're going to have a lot of hip rotation or a lot of movement in the hips. And that can cause, first of all, it's wasted energy. Any extra motion is wasted energy. And those of you doing long course, we want to conserve as much energy as possible, because if you're doing long course, you got to complete that long bike ride, and then you have to either do a half marathon or a full marathon. So we, again, want to conserve as much energy as we can. Preserving that energy on the bike is going to help with your overall event. So supporting the pelvis so that you've got a stable platform so you can not only generate power, but transfer that power to your pedals. Neck and shoulder issues. Some people may be fine at the back end. Their knees feel fine, their feet are fine, the saddle feels great, but they have severe neck and shoulder issues. And that's typically from the bike being set up in a more aggressive position than what your body can handle. On the slide there, the young man that I was fitting, his bike was as aggressive as it could go. The pads were as narrow as they could go. And I don't know if you can tell, he is a former football player, so a little bit bigger build than a typical triathlete that might be about this big around. And so his shoulders, his elbows were in very, very, very close, which he thought was extremely aerodynamic. But what that does is it can cause a lot of shoulder pain behind the scapula. It can cause rotator cuff issues. It can also close off your breathing because now you're compressing your chest. And I don't care if you're doing a sprint or a full Ironman, we all have to eat and drink on the bike. If you're doing a time trial, you can suffer a lot more than triathletes and still be fast, but we still want to be able to generate power. If the reach is too long and too low, I've seen people with really long aero extensions, or especially if they put clip-on bars on their road bikes. What happens is they put them on there and then they can't get to them. And me stretching my arms out like that, it causes a lot of strain behind the neck and shoulders. And if your bars are too low, there's been many times that I've seen people with their bars so low that their spine, instead of being a nice neutral spine, ends up being curved. Now, that curved back is not aero. And when your back is curved, you're actually creating more drag because you're not as low. I've had instances where I've actually raised the front end and that back flattens out and they are overall lower on the bike. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but there has been many a times that I've raised the front of somebody's bike and they ended up getting lower, more aerodynamic. So what we're always trying to do is make the bike fit you. We don't want it to be too narrow in the front. Generally, we want the elbows to be inside the width of your hips, but they don't have to be like so close together that it's causing a lot of strain on your body. Anytime anytime that we make your body suffer and you can't hold that aero position, you're increasing the frontal surface area, which increases the drag. And that's what we're trying to do, is overcome that drag. So getting you in a position where you can hold it on the base bar, or hold it on your aero extensions, not your base bar. So again, base bar, you're going to be up a little bit higher. And that's a position that for starting off out of transition, for doing sharp turns, you may come up, or descending, you may come up to your base bar. But for the most part, we'd like it to be where you can hold that aero position for 80, 90% of the time and comfortably. So the importance, so fit solutions, we'll go into fit solutions. Right position for you so that we're not compressing arteries or nerves, and that we give you a good platform to sit on so that you can generate power and power transfer. Aero bars. If your bars are too narrow, that causes a lot of shoulder pain. When it's too narrow, I know a lot of you think, okay, I'm going to get them as narrow as I can because that's going to get me more aerodynamic. Well, I'm pretty broad-shouldered, and so if I go too narrow, I can feel the strain back behind my scapula. So I want to make sure it's almost like a plank position. We want the elbow and the shoulder to be, the elbow right under the shoulder to give us a good platform. I will come in just a little bit slightly. The main and most important thing is elbows should be narrower than our hips. And if you go are set a little bit narrower than your hips. If they're set a lot narrower, believe me, you're not getting any more aerodynamic benefit. We can test it in the wind tunnel, but as long as they're a little narrower than your hips, you are getting the aero benefit and still getting a good stable platform. When you're in those aero bars, we want your upper body, the skeletal system, to support you, not your muscular system. So if you're in an aero position where you're having to hang on, you're clenching your clenching your aero extensions, your fists are pulling you into position. That tension, first of all, it causes a lot of extra energy to be wasted. And you want to, if you're doing a triathlon, I don't care if it's a sprint or an Ironman, you want to save that energy for the run, because no matter how great your bike split is, you still have to get off the bike and run. So we need to save a little bit of energy for the run. The bar reach, we want to set it to where you can support yourself. So not only like a plank position from the front, from the side, we want to see the elbow slightly, not too far under the shoulder because that can cause issues, but the elbow underneath the shoulder like a plank. If you're way out here like Superman, again, that's going to put a lot of extra strain on the shoulders. Now, with time trialists, their arms can be a little bit further out. But like I said, the time trialists do not have to get off the bike and run. So they can afford to be in a position that may be a little bit more painful, a little less comfortable, because they're not going to run unless they're running to the podium to get their award. We want to balance your aerodynamics with your comfort and ability to produce power. So when I was talking earlier about some people want their bike to be as aero as the bike will be, that doesn't mean your body can handle that aggressive of a position. I've had many people where their bike was so slammed in the front, and when they get on it and I'm looking at them, I see not only their back is curved like this as opposed to having a nice flat torso. And then I ask them, well, how long do you stay in your aero position? Well, I have to come up every 20 or 30 minutes to my base bar because I can't hold that position. So while it makes your bike look really cool when it's slammed, or you have the stem in that negative position, or it's as low as it will go, if you can't hold that position and you have difficulty staying in that in your aero extensions, and you have to come up to your base bar, that's a big difference from here to here. And if you're up on your base bars for the majority of your ride, you might as well be riding a road bike, because you're not getting any benefit from a tri bike, and it weighs a little bit more than a road bike. So making the bike fit you. It is a marriage of aerodynamics, comfort, and your ability to produce power. None of those are going to be 100%. We're not going to be as aero as the bike can go. Maybe it will be, but for most of us, it's not. You may not be 100% powerful, and you may not be 100% comfortable. Our job when we work together is to find the blend of those three so that you're in the optimal position for you. Funny story, there's been plenty of athletes that I have raised their front end raised their handlebars, and they actually got lower. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but when you think about it, I don't know if you can see this if I demonstrate. If they're too low, their back is hunched, but if I raise their handlebars and they flatten out, it actually makes you lower. There's the Specialized, when I first went out there and they started talking about Aero Fits, they had were just doing Saxo Bank, which is a former professional team's fits, and they would only allow them at first to do their time trial bikes. And they said when they got there, all the bikes were lined up, and there were tall riders and short riders, and all the seat heights were different heights, but the front ends were all slammed as low as they would go. It didn't matter if somebody was 6 foot. That's back when Andy Schleck was on the team, and he was tall. And little European guys that are short, seat heights were all different, but they had slammed all of their handlebars. So they raised quite a few of their handlebars, and they said their times got better and their body position was better, aerodynamics were better. So what we're on an aero bike, we're always or any bike, not just an aero bike, but the importance of aerodynamics. Any cyclist is, our main objective is to overcome drag. And drag is that force of us going through the air and the wind hitting our frontal surface area. And so it's the biggest thing affecting us as a cyclist. 70 to 90% of the power that we generate is going towards overcoming aerodynamic drag. So things that we want to do to make our bike position, we want to make us as aero as possible, but not compromise your body. To maximize the speed, we want to minimize the drag. So when we decrease the frontal surface area, it decreases drag. But again, I can't emphasize it enough that if you are too low for what your body can handle, you end up coming up, several things happen. You end up coming up to your base bars, or you can't generate power. And if you can't generate power, you're not going to generate speed. The biggest thing that I look at with triathletes is hamstring flexibility and hip flexibility. When you start getting lower in the front, you can close off the hip. And what we want to make sure that we don't go beyond what your body can handle. When I perform a fit here, I always do a physical assessment. And one of those measurements is your hip flexibility. And I use a goniometer, and I actually measure the degree of your hip flexibility. If we put you beyond what your hip flexibility can handle, and you're riding, you can't turn the pedals over, your body's going to compensate in some way. You either may rock your hips a whole lot more. If you can't tolerate how aggressive it is, your hips are going to rock. You've seen people whose legs pedal, their knees come out this way. It's not always because they're a new rider. Sometimes it's because their leg can only go so high, but they've got their bike set so aggressive that their knee has to go someplace. It can't come all the way up, so it comes out. So maintaining a proper hip angle while you're on the bike is critical. And that can affect your run also for you triathletes. So if I have you too aggressive and you maybe have a great bike split, but then you get off and your hip seize up and then you can't run. I have a triathlete I worked with when I very first started here. And as a triathlete, she made a great triathlete because she was that type A personality with a high threshold for pain and pretty vocal. So I was a new fitter, so I was still a little bit, I was still a little green around the ears, I would say. And so as I was fitting her, and she'd been fit before, and she'd been fit by some pretty notable fitters, she was dictating the fit. And as a new fitter, I probably let her dictate the fit more than I should have. Well, she went and did an Ironman. Anyway, by her dictating the fit, her fit was a little too aggressive for her body, but she's like, I've always ridden it like this, and this feels good. Well, she went and did Ironman Texas, and this is back when we first came to Texas. And guess what? She had the fastest bike split she'd had in a long time. Great bike split, but she got off and her run suffered. Hips seized up. She had a hard time turning her legs over. And I know when you get off the bike, the first mile to 3 miles take a little while to loosen up, but her fit on the bike was too aggressive. And I learned something from that because she came back and told me I had a hard time with the run. And that's like, okay, Cynthia, you've got to hold your ground when you're doing a fit and tell reasons why. The reasons why she needed to be in a little less aggressive position was so that her hips wouldn't be closed off and fatigue too much. So the most important thing for me is looking at your body off the bike so that when we start doing the fit, I'm making sure the bike fits you. That's why the physical assessment's the most important part of the process. So there's a lot of information that goes on with aero bike fits, and I could go on and on, but I will leave some time for questions at the end. Another thing, I just threw a slide in about aero shapes and the things that you can do with, if you're using an aero bike, the round tubes versus an aero tube, and there's, I don't have the slide. Okay. Round tubes versus an aero-shaped tube, an ovalized tube. Round objects, when the air goes around them, it creates a lot of turbulence behind the round part of the bike. The aero tubes that are like a teardrop shape, the air flows a lot smoother around them. And it's the same thing with our body. If you're doing any type of event where you're being timed, an aero helmet will help reduce drag over your head. And then when you're in that aero position, behind your head, a lot of turbulence can be created behind your head. And so that's another thing that I'll look at after we get done with your fit, is let you put your aero helmet on, and we'll check the position to make sure your helmet's not taking away from your aerodynamics. So round tubes versus aero tubes. It's been proven that the aero-shaped bikes, like the head tube, the down tube, do make a lot better, reduced drag. I threw a slide in there just for fun about biggest bang for your buck. And this is mostly pertaining to time trials, but little things that you can pick up on when you're doing an event. An aero helmet makes, and the time savings, I guess, is over 40K, which for triathletes, most of us are doing a little bit longer. But an aero helmet can save you a lot of time. And that's one of the cheapest things that you can purchase. Making sure that you have clothing that is tight and not loose. I can't read my own notes, sorry. Aero bars, a road bike where you're up like this, even if you put aero bars on a road bike, can reduce the frontal surface area and save you quite a bit of time, over 40K. Big thing is clothing. I know triathletes, you will usually wear very tight-fitting clothing, but if you're a time trialist, that's where a skin suit comes in. And a skin suit fits close to your body, doesn't have a lot of extra fabric that the wind is catching, because if you have a lot of extra fabric catching the wind, that's causing a lot more drag. And if you're doing a time trial for 40K, a second or 2 seconds over 40K can be the difference between 1st and 10th place. And most of us sign up for events, you say, oh, I'm just doing it for the experience. But if you're doing a time trial, most of us do care about our time. And even if you are just doing a triathlon for the fun of it, all of us would like to have a little bit better time. I know that I've done a try and I still checked my time, even though I knew I wasn't going to win. So lots of things you can do, aero bikes, aero wheels, things like that. Wheels are expensive, but there's a lot of things you can do cheaply to help improve your time. So if you're in the market for a new bike, there's things that we consider. I know the most important thing people consider is the cost or budget. And there's a lot of great bikes out there. You don't have to spend 10,000 plus to get a great bike. In fact, one of the bikes that we sell, the Trek Speed Concept, still a lot of money, I understand, but for less than $5,000, you can get an aero bike with aero wheels, carbon aero bars that can be tailored to you, and it's a very fast bike. It's been very tested in the wind tunnel. Things to consider too is your type of events. If you're looking for a new bike and just want one bike, but you like to go out and do that Saturday morning group ride, most group rides don't appreciate triathletes in the peloton or in the pack. So you might prefer to get a road bike, and you can still do an aero event, a time trial, or a triathlon with your road bike. And then bike geometries. When you think about road bikes, we all know that they come in like a 50, 52, 54 centimeter sizes. Tri bikes may come in those sizes, but some of them come in what I call t-shirt sizes: small, medium, large, extra small. And those geometries are not quite the, they don't pertain to the road bike. So if you know I ride a 56 in a road bike, I need a 56 or a medium or a large in a tri bike. It doesn't always correlate. Tri bike geometries are all over the place. When I talk about bike geometry, it's the angles on the frame. How long is the top tube? How tall is the front? I talk about stack, or I always look at stack and reach when we're talking about aero bikes. That's something you don't have to understand, but if the frame stack and reach, or the arm pad stack and reach, that's how tall and how far from the bottom bracket things are. They're all over the place. And if you want to know, do I ride a large? Well, in brand X, you may ride a large. Brand Y, you may ride a medium. Or you might could fit on either one. Those are things I can help you with. I go through, I offer a fit on our size cycle, which is a device that I can set the geometry up to be, that you come in saying, okay, I want to buy a new specialized shiv. And I look, going through the physical assessment, I think, okay, you're probably a large, so I'll set it up as the frame size of a large, make adjustments from there, take measurements and say, well, maybe an extra large might fit you better. But those are things with the size cycle I can do and give you a recommendation. Or I might find out that brand is not going to work for you, that a Trek would work better. So just because you know what size you ride in a road bike doesn't mean you're going to ride that same size in a tri bike. So I've gone through a lot of information. I did talk a little bit about what I do here in the studio. I think for triathletes, the most important bike fit is the one you get before you purchase a new bike, so that you make sure that that bike that you've been dreaming about is going to be something that will work for you. Today, bikes are so, I don't want to say over-engineered, but everything's so integrated that if you know your numbers before you get a bike, then when the bike comes in and you go to have it built, things can be set up to your measurements, and then you don't have to worry about trying to move things or recable things. And again, with things being integrated, so many of the aero bikes, you don't see one cable on those bikes, and that means it's all integrated inside of things, and it's not easy to do adjustments. It can be adjusted, but it may cost you a little bit more because we have to take things apart, pull cables and things like that. So the most important fit is really your first fit. So what I do here in the studio is by appointment. It takes about 2 to 2.5 hours. And if I'm doing a size cycle fit, typically I'll get those done in an hour and a half because it's just very easy. It's very automated, quick and easy to make adjustments. And I'm not done with any fit till we're both happy, by the way. But I go through an interview with you. So I want to know what kind of an athlete you are. How long have you been riding? What are your events? What goals are you working towards? What discomfort do you currently have? And what injuries have you had? Because previous injuries can affect your bike fit. After that, I go through a physical assessment. And again, this is a very important step in the bike fit process. I look at your body structure, foot structure, legs, flexibility, most importantly, hamstrings, hips, leg length. That's another factor that can affect your bike fit. And then I get you on the bike. We go through the retool motion capture. It's a dynamic fit. So we are actually measuring you while you're riding under load. So I see how your body reacts real time and start making adjustments. And we go through everything from your shoes, the cleats, the saddle, to the front end, aero bars, aero pads, aero extensions, the reach to the aero extensions. And just make sure we get the bike dialed in to you and your unique body and riding style. I give you a full report that has all your bike measurements, before and after, all of your body, the results of the physical assessment, and we send it to you, and then you get a free follow-up. That's included. I like to see you in 30 days or so we can see how you've adjusted to the changes that we've made. And I guess at this time, I welcome questions. I know I've gone over a lot of information kind of quickly, but if it, Okay, well, thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate it.